Hi, my name is Mark Burton. I'm a developmental pediatrician from the New York area and one of the hosts for this year's Healthcare Summit. And I'm looking forward to talking to Dr. Vo and Dr. McDermid today. Um, Kind of in an informal way, we want to cover a lot about their work developing a mindful hospital program, a program that integrates mindfulness into multiple aspects of working together in a hospital. So we decided ahead of time that the two doctors joining me today, who I'm excited to talk to, are going to tell us a little bit about their backgrounds more informally. So we might as well just jump in. I'll let them each introduce themselves and then we'll get started with the discussion of our topic. So one of you can get started, whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead and go first. So, first of all, thanks for having us, Mark. It's great to reconnect. Mark and I have been friends and colleagues for, I think, about 8 or 9 years now. We met at one of the UCSD Mindfulness for Youth conferences, one of the early in-person conferences, and I've certainly learned a lot from you over the years. And we've presented together a number of times, so it's great to reconnect. I'm a pediatrician. I'm a specialist in adolescent medicine and I'm the co-founder and director for the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness, which we'll be talking about a bit today. And I've been bringing mindfulness to children and to youth, as well as to healthcare professionals, as well as to parents and caregivers. And my mindfulness training and practice originally comes from the Zen tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, which predated actually my involvement in medicine, and it's been a big part of my life ever since. So a lot of what I try to do is embody some of my teachers, including people like Thich Nhat Hanh and many others as well. So it's great to be with you today, Mark and Joanna.
Pleasure seeing you too, Zoom.
Yes, it's delightful to be here with you, Mark, and Zoom today. I'm Joanna McDermid, and my background is child and adolescent psychiatry, and I'm the Associate Director for the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness. And I'm just really excited today to be talking about how we're bringing mindfulness to our children and youth, to our colleagues and staff, and also to our wonderful caregivers and parents. So without further ado, why don't we talk a little more about how we're trying to create a more mindful hospital?
Great, thank you. Yeah, I was looking forward to this topic in particular because I think um, there's so much being covered at the conference, and um, everyone has their expertise to talk about. But for you guys in particular, you're talking about something that I think is really important, which is looking at implementing mindfulness kind of community wide and how it can support, not just each of us as individuals, but really each of us in terms of how we relate to everyone around us too. So, how would you describe, I guess um, I'll let you guys sort out. We'll just do this conversationally. Who's going to go first? But how would you describe what it even means to start talking about a mindful hospital or a mindful community on that scale? What does that mean to you guys each individually?
Yeah, I'll share that we came up with this vision of a more mindful hospital kind of together collectively, and we just celebrated our second year anniversary of the founding of the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness, which I believe is one of the first of its kind at an academic pediatric hospital, and it's a really exciting initiative. And this vision really came from many of our colleagues throughout the hospital who have been bringing mindfulness into their personal lives and their personal work. And as you said, the vision is really about expanding mindfulness beyond something that we do individually. And a lot of us learn that from, again, teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh. I remember there was a conference at Harvard Medical School where Thich Nhat Hanh and John Kabat-Zinn were panelists, and I believe Chris Germer was one of the interviewers. So John Kabat-Zinn, of course, brought mindfulness into Western medicine in a big way with mindfulness based stress reduction, and Chris Germer helped to develop mindful self-compassion. And so so John asked Thich Nhat Hanh. He said, mindfulness is getting mainstream again. This is around 2014 or so. He said, mindfulness is getting mainstream. What are we missing? And Thich Nhat Hanh said, we're missing community. that we're missing this idea that mindfulness is something that we do together, that we wake up together. It's not just an individual affair. And so that's our real vision with a more mindful hospital. And we say more mindful because we never really get there. We never say, okay, we got mindful, we're there, we're done. It's a practice, it's a way. It's not just an outcome, but it's a process. And we want to embrace every moment of that process. So our vision is to help to support a more mindful hospital where mindfulness is infused in everything we do. So just take a moment to imagine your own workplace, your own hospital, your own clinic, your own university, wherever you're working. What would it be like if that workplace had mindfulness infused in everything that you did and all of your colleagues as well? That it was part of the air, part of the culture, part of the furniture. That when you saw patients, you brought mindfulness to that encounter, that when you treated patients or when they were learning and going through their own healing journey, that they were able to learn mindfulness to support their healing. Of course, in addition to all of the other treatments that they need. That when you're doing leadership or business or administration or education or research, that mindfulness is embedded in all of those things. That when parents and caregivers are caring for sick children, that they also have the opportunity to experience mindfulness and to learn mindfulness. And imagine how transformative, how much of a culture change, how healing that kind of culture could be. So that's our big vision, and we're certainly not there in 2022, and we may not be there in 2032, but I think we have the strong seeds, we have the elements, and we're really sharing this vision, and we're getting a lot of positive response. I think this is something that people in our system are really hungry for. Joanna, what would you add to that?
Well, I'm wondering, Zoom, as part of our sort of honoring of mindfulness, we usually start with a little practice. So I wondered if maybe you could guide us with a short practice so that we can kind of feel this together here and enjoy that together.
Oh yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So the practice that I've been offering a lot in our community is I'm calling it loving kindness for service providers. I don't know if that's the original name for it. I got this from Larry Yang, who many of you may know. He's a social worker, a psychotherapist, and he wrote a wonderful book called Waking Up Together about the intersection of mindfulness and anti-racism and social justice. That's really inspired me. And this practice is been really helpful for me and for others in the experience of moral distress. And I know so many of us have experienced a lot of moral distress, a lot of secondary trauma, especially these past 2 years during the pandemic, but of course, even before the pandemic, when we're, struggling to serve our patients or our clients as well as we can, but we're encountering difficulties in that. So I'm going to offer, this is about maybe a 5-minute version of this practice. And I'm going to invite all of the audience members, wherever you are, to get comfortable and to approach this with an experimentational spirit. And also choosing if right now is not maybe the right time for you to practice something like this, then honoring that as well. But if you'd like to practice this with us, find a comfortable position. You can face away from the screen if you'd like. You can sit, you can stand, or you can lie down. I'm going to invite one sound of the bell. This bell is the sound of our friend just inviting us to be here right now. Finding our breath, knowing that we're alive. Breathing in, I know that I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I know that I'm breathing out. In and out. There's nowhere to go, there's nothing to do. Just being here just as you are is good enough. I'm going to invite you, if you'd like, to bring to mind a situation that might be a bit challenging at work, maybe on that scale of 2 out of 10, not the most challenging situation, but some situation where there is some suffering, either in yourself or a patient or a colleague or a trainee. Just bring to mind what this situation is, recognizing the suffering that's happening, either in yourself or in the other person or both. As best you can, breathing and staying with that, noticing how it feels in the body. And then inviting the following intention, perhaps repeating this silently to yourself a few times without forcing or expecting anything particular happening, just inviting this intention and noticing what happens. May I be as loving as possible in this moment. May I be as loving as possible. Breathing with intention without judging, forcing, or expecting. If I cannot be loving in this moment, may I be kind. If I cannot be loving, may I be kind. If I cannot be kind, may I be non judgmental. May I be non judgmental. Again, just breathing, noticing what comes up with curiosity without judgment when we bring this intention to mind. If I cannot be non judgmental, may I avoid causing harm. May I avoid causing harm. If I cannot avoid causing harm, may I cause the least amount of harm possible. May I cause the least amounts of harm possible. As we end the meditation, perhaps opening your eyes, giving yourself thanks for taking some time to bring some kindness to yourself into the situation, and perhaps observing what came up for you in this meditation. And I'm wondering if Mark, if you feel comfortable sharing, did anything come up for you? What did you experience during this meditation?
Um, I always find these types of meditations particularly grounding personally. I think the um, ability to come back to, let's just remind myself that, even in a difficult situation, settle and just set my intentions as best I can to navigate it as well as I can is just, that's, I mean, it took me years to sort of really reach that sense of like, okay, that's good. That's what I can do right now. And so I really appreciated it. And I think that's what that's really what it was for me in that moment. It's always a good reminder to just the day gets really busy for me, and I sometimes get all caught up in my thoughts, thinking so many things to do and handle. To just come back to something like that is, really useful for me, I think.
Thanks.
Um, Actually, there was a second thought I had when it was ending, which I think it's mildly entertaining that the three of us are here to talk about mindfulness, and we all forgot that we had agreed to start with a practice.
We got in that autopilot mode.
Yeah,
Hey, let's
yeah,
get things done. That's such a
yeah,
strong habit, isn't it, in our
yeah,
work, in our
yeah.
lives?
So, Joanna, do you want to continue?
Sure, and I'll just share, Zoom, I love that practice. Thank you so much for sharing it with us and for this opportunity to practice it together. It kind of feels as though like a pebble sort of, dropping down through the water, right? And it's just very grounding, like you said, Mark. So I just love that practice. So what a nice way to do this together. So Zoom, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about this vision of a more mindful hospital. That's how we've sort of really like tried to bring that to life. And I'm happy to share a few ideas that I have on that and what this wonderful endeavor has been to actually do this together and to kind of co-create this with our wonderful community here, and now to be able to share it in this forum. So perhaps others can be maybe inspired or find practical ways that they can too, foster this healing community, this capacity for collective resilience. So maybe you could share a little bit, and then I'd perhaps like to talk a little bit about how we're bringing mindfulness and resilience and skills to our parents and caregivers. But maybe first we could talk a little bit about our triangle, our kind of our vision for who we serve and how we serve and how we show up.
Yeah, so we've got a few kind of mental models. So one is this triangle, which is about who are we trying to serve. And in
Mhm.
a pediatric hospital, we really have three different populations that we hope to serve. The first is children and youth, and that's actually how we got our start teaching mindfulness to children and youth through a program that Dr. Jake Locke and I co-developed called Mindful Awareness and Resilient Skills for Adolescents. The
Mhm.
second corner of that triangle is parents and caregivers, and that's something that I can't wait to hear you tell more about what we're doing in that area. And then the third is health professionals, is staff, is us. And actually, I would say that's the foundation because if we're not practicing mindfulness, then none of the rest matters. We really have to practice, embody, and learn it before we can bring it to work, before we can offer it to others. So that's one triangle. And then the other triangle we have is kind of like a public health triangle, and it's about the different populations, the levels of who we want to try to reach. There's the broad base level of people who maybe have never heard of mindfulness, may not be interested in it, but how can we reach them in some small ways? And then there's a very specialized population of people who are willing to do a 6-week course or an 8-week course and really commit to learning more about it and experimenting with it and trying it in their lives. And then there's even a more specialized cohort of people who really want to make it a part of their life, part of their career, do further training, leadership development in it. So we try to have offerings for all three populations and at different levels of that kind of population pyramid. And we could spend the whole time giving examples, but I'll just give one example that I'm really excited about, which is teaching mindfulness to our healthcare trainees because they are really our next generation of healers. And so in this, I've been really inspired by the work of Ron Epstein and Michael Krasner at the University of Rochester and their work in mindful practice. And both Joanna and I have done their trainings. And here at BC Children's Hospital, we've adapted it to a program called Mindful Healing, and I've brought in some other influences, of course, including Thich Nhat Hanh and some others as well. And so we have an 8-week program that we've been teaching for the last few years to different groups of healthcare trainees, including last year we did a cohort of multidisciplinary fellows from psychiatry, from pediatrics, from social work, from psychology. And the past 2 years, we've been teaching it to our pediatric first year residents as well. And in Canada, pediatrics is a 4-year residency. So if this continues, and it's been a tremendous success, I think that we'll have our entire cohort of pediatric residents trained in this very shortly. And the last cohort that I did just a couple months ago, in one of the sharings, one of the residents really inspired us. She said, one of the things that we do just after handover, when we're coming on shift, me and another resident, we go to a quiet room and we just take 3 minutes just to meditate by ourselves. And then that changes the whole shift that we have together, whether it's a 12-hour shift or a 20-hour shift. And we know these are really exhausting shifts, but she said that really helped them to work better together and also change the way that they approach that shift. So the stories like that really, really inspire me. And I think there's a huge potential with our next generation of trainees to practice and be mindful healers in a way that maybe we didn't really have that opportunity in my generation. And I think we have the same opportunity with parents and caregivers because we know how hard it is for parents and caregivers when they're caring for sick children and they have their own pressures as well. So, Joanna, could you tell us a little bit about what we're offering to our parents and caregivers at BC Children's Hospital?
Of course, soon. So the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness has started to offer a series of group sessions to parents and caregivers whose children or youth are receiving care and support through our hospital. So this is part of our MARS PC pilot program. So that stands for Mindful Awareness and Resilient Skills for Parents and Caregivers. So we're very big on acronyms and catchy names. And surely I'll describe a few more things like Thankful Thursdays, Wake Up Wednesdays, etc. But I'll continue with the MARS PC. So the sessions currently are educational and experiential in nature, and they're facilitated by Dzung and by myself. And so the intention of this group is to help parents to be at their best while they're caring for their loved one. And this loved one may be struggling with psychological distress, including anxiety or depression, perhaps chronic illness or pain. So we know that skills and mindful awareness can contribute to resilience, to positive emotions, to well-being. And so it's a series of 6 one-hour sessions. Right now they're virtual, but we intend to make them hybrid, so in-person and virtual to meet people where they're at. And the participants are encouraged to attend all of the 6 sessions as best as possible because each session builds on the foundations of the last. We truly try to emphasize the importance of honoring the journey, really infusing this with a sense of awareness. Various themes are explored. Self and inner compassion is absolutely vital, and a sense of really creating a community whereby we can kind of go through this together. So I'm happy to talk more about the themes, but perhaps we might want to talk a little bit more about some of the other things that we're doing to bring mindfulness to each of our populations. And I suppose the other thing too is with this triangle, right? With trying to reach, starting with ourselves, that sangha, that community that you described, Zoom. Every action, our presence, the way we show up, truly can have like a resounding impact. I know that for myself in psychiatry, oftentimes I'm meeting with an individual or families or etc. And I don't really know where things might go. But I know that if I show up in a way, as best I can, not striving, but just showing up with a sense of clarity and compassion, I can kind of, there's a bit of a relief knowing that at that moment, I've done my best to plant the seed of healing, and forgiving myself when I miss the mark, right? Or when I'm less skillful. But it really does give a sense of relief and a sense of meaningfulness when we can show up that way. And everything is connected. So the way we show up for each other, the way we show up for ourselves, the way that we show up for parents and for youth and the children, it's all interconnected.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really love about your work with parents and caregivers, uh, as pediatricians and as child and adolescent psychiatrists, we we um, we care for not only the children and youth, but we also care for the parents and caregivers. So we actually have 2 patients at a time. And I know, Mark, you've talked and written quite a lot about that as well, about how we need to support the parents, the families, not just the children and youth. So that's something I think a little bit different and unique when we're working with children and youth compared to other providers. What do you think about that, Mark?
Well, I think I mean, that idea just pulls together everything I think we're talking about today because, in the end, first of all, you can't work with a child, I think, without working with a family. It's just, it doesn't make sense emotionally, but it doesn't make sense logistically either. And so often when parents are feeling swamped and overwhelmed, they're at the same time being asked to really navigate very challenging situations. And, as the first, that was a question I had for you, Joanna, as I was listening to you, is just, introducing mindfulness to parents in the hospital setting must mean often introducing it to people who are in the middle of, really in crisis almost, or I'm sure individually it feels like a crisis, whether or not it is medically. And that's a very challenging. I think there's something to talk about there about how it we haven't really talked on how we see what mindfulness means, because I think the word gets used so many different ways, but it really shows that the concept of mindfulness helps build resilience. So I do think that when you start talking about mindfulness in family, that allows us to um, really just explore. First of all, I think it's a hugely overlooked part of pediatric care in general. That what the experience of parents is often backburnered, in a way that doesn't make any sense. Just to be straightforward about it. Um, and then when you look at the practice of mindfulness, because I think this matters for both healthcare providers and for parents, is just that recognition that, as cliched as it may sound, it really does matter that we take care of ourselves first. I think it's, when you look at the real meaning of that, there really is how we take care of ourselves allows us to, as you were saying, Joanna, just it's that cause and effect of like how we interact with the world changes everything around us a little bit. And just being able to be there in a realistic, compassionate way allows us to influence that situation, as best as we're able. So yeah, I think it really does touch on, and I think I'll just say, I'll end because it's really your session, but I will end by saying, um, the idea that it just, it's I think it's important when trying to pick up a new habit like this, like for somebody who doesn't have a mindfulness practice, to feel strongly motivated, and as a parent or a caretaker to recognize that it isn't a self-help practice. It's a practice that's much more than that, helps people stay engaged with it.
Absolutely. I think you said that really beautifully, Mark. First of all, sort of acknowledging the real power of our presence, and we can cultivate it, and something we can control. Not we can't control our automatic response reactions, right, or our own biology, but we can understand it and work with it, right, so that we can bring our best. So I like when you were saying about the resilience, the sense of cause and effect. There's also a sense of kind of humility and letting go as well, whereby we can bring our best, and then the outcome is what it is, but it's our response to that and returning to those foundations or principles of mindfulness and awareness, which is around being curious. Like, who doesn't want to be curious, right? Like, that's a beautiful way, an attitude to have in life always. And so that kind of is a little bit of a salve, a little bit of an antidote to perfectionism, right? Or it's one way or the other, or I've got to get it right, and there's so much pressure to do it right in parenting, and also so many emotions and a sense of guilt, or a sense of difficulty when things don't go well, or when your child is struggling, or when you feel that you haven't met your own expectations, right? So to be able to be fully present with the experience as it is. So this idea as well of capitalizing on the positive moments, right? I know we sometimes say, catching things when they're good, when they're good, right? So that taps into this idea of savoring. Some of us like that word, some of us don't, but really being able to enjoy and to take care of those times that are truly good and that are lovely and wonderful. And so building on that positive neuroplasticity while at the same time bringing skillfulness to managing the stress, like that, those skills, capitalizing on the positive, the emotions, the our heartfulness aspect, and then the other part of it being skillful with how we pay attention, how we show up, our how we manage our stress signature, what happens to our judgments and thinking, and how quickly we can get caught up and lost in thought, lost in judgments, and coming back to what matters, right? Over and over again, and then forgiving ourselves for not being perfect, which then opens the door to our humanity and our truly beautiful heart that's beating every moment, and then taking our lesson from our heart that's saying, hey, I'm going to pump the blood to myself first before I go out to the rest of it. So it's like it's all connected and makes sense, although very difficult to practice, as you mentioned. So habits, and reminding ourselves and having those mindfulness reminders or bells of mindfulness in our day, whichever way makes sense for us, is important.
I want to pick up on something else you said, Mark. We haven't really defined mindfulness yet in conversation. And
That was one of the notes I was writing down here. Yeah.
yeah, and I know in the mindfulness world and in the popular culture, there's so many ideas. What is mindfulness and what is not mindfulness as well? And I don't want to wade too deeply into those debates, but what I will say is the definition that I've been offering. I call it consider it like a hypothesis. So I don't think mindfulness can really be defined in words alone. But it's a hypothesis, it's something to experiment with. And the definition that we've been offering, I think, has certainly resonated with our teenagers. And I think it's also starting to resonate with our parents as well. So I'll share it with the audience. And I've modified John Kabat-Zinn's famous definition. So John Kabat-Zinn's famous definition is quoted everywhere. Mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and without judgment. And I've modified it just a little bit. I offer mindfulness as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and with unconditional love. Unconditional love. And parents, I think, really resonate with that because they know intuitively that being a parent is loving their child unconditionally. And it doesn't mean that they always love the behaviors or the situations that they find themselves in with their children, or even like those things, but they love their children. And I think unconditional love really embodies the spirit of mindfulness to me because when we're present with love, that's when healing can happen. And I've also been really inspired just this past few weeks. I've been rereading a book that I read many years ago, Bell Hooks, All About Love. And Bell Hooks was also inspired by Thich Nhat Hanh and Sharon Salzberg and some other kind of Buddhist teachers. And she talks about love. It's not an emotion. It's not a feeling. It's not about like falling in love. It's actually a decision. It's an action. It's a commitment. And so with mindfulness, if we choose to be present and we choose to bring the spirit of love into that moment, even a difficult moment, that's when it really has the power of healing. And I'll just soften that definition by saying that if that doesn't resonate with people, or if it seems like it's an impossible bar and that we're going to use it as a standard to judge ourselves by, then it's not a useful definition and you can use a different definition. So I'm not too,
Drop the words. Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Find the
not too
meaning, drop the words. Yeah.
exactly. I'm not too attached to the words. Yeah.
Just with that last, I absolutely love that definition, Zoom, and I think that kind of these capacities of concentration and attention, coupled with our capacity to love, like the warm and kind of cool or cold kind of aspects, if you will, if we want to bring a temperature analogy. And the other part too, I think, is this awareness of the process by which we engage with our heart, or re-engage with our heart, or those parts of it that are feeling somewhat fractured. And so I think this brings up also a really beautiful distinction in regards to healing versus curing. And that is obviously this aspect of healing, reintegrating in a way that makes sense, redefining or creating the story that is most meaningful and resonates most with myself and my family and my colleagues and my work and my vocation. And I think that that ties nicely into this aspect of creating a more mindful hospital. So and how we can help heal together. And this is a healing healthcare summit. And so, really spending some time on how, why, I think we understand why, but how we can be with that understanding of how needed the healing is and how we can do that together.
Yeah,
So
and I'm wondering if Joanna, you could share a little bit more concretely and specifically about what that might look like at a time like this where we know that healthcare professionals are under tremendous stress and burnout and secondary trauma and moral distress is at an all-time high. Certainly, it was a problem before COVID, before the opioid pandemic, before a lot of the discussion about racism in healthcare, but it's certainly blown up in the past 2 years, in my experience. And there's a lot of our colleagues who are not going to have time or interest in taking a 6-week course or reading a book. Um, is there anything that we can do? How can we offer mindfulness concretely to our colleagues who are not going to, or not interested, or don't have the time to take a 6-week course, for example?
Yeah, this is I think a really a great question. And so I think it's important to be curious about how best we can show up for each other in the healthcare setting that we find ourselves. So first and foremost, how am I taking care of myself? And that is something that each of us need to determine. Um, and then from there, how am I interacting with my environment, such that this, again, I come to this concept of interconnectedness, right? Interbeing, that there's this shared space, but not only a shared space with others, but a shared space with myself. Therefore, I feel that having your own practice, whatever that is, be it sort of in regards to being in touch with our body, maybe it's doing a little. I love mindful walking, for example, and we're always walking, actually, right, from room to room, from our car to our home. Really, I feel like the distal parts of our body for grounding. So the feet can be a really nice way, and I always like to actually give a little smile to my feet when I'm doing a body scan, like, thank you, feet. You take me everywhere, help me stand up. Some of us might have disabilities, so we may not be able to stand in the ways, or there's pain in them, but bringing that awareness into our feet, maybe doing some mindful walking. Obviously, nutrition and sleep, I can't speak enough about that, and connectedness. So remaining socially connected, and really truly asking each other how we're doing. We're going to talk a little bit, I hope, about our mindful hospital deck of cards, which is a really neat initiative that we have considered. And I think one of the cards, I don't know if you have an example with you there, but one of the cards is maybe having a cup of tea with your colleague, right? And so really it's actually being fully present in that moment together in your day. That may not seem like much, but we are living each moment of our day and we're together. And why not, if we have an opportunity, be there in that moment right there and then and enjoy a cup of tea together. It's very simple, but it actually makes a difference. So there's that. We can talk about more concrete ways of bringing mindfulness to others in a hospital setting. And I wonder if that might be a good thing to kind of talk about some practical pieces. Yeah, okay, cool. So one of the initiatives we're really kind of excited about is, and this idea was born and put into practice through a series of conversations in regards to how we can bring mindfulness in action. Our recent retreat, which was held in the fall, the theme was mindfulness in action. And so we really spent some time on considering, exploring together ways that we can infuse this energy and spirit of mindfulness in our settings, wherever we find ourselves. So this deck of cards is called a More Mindful Hospital Deck of Cards, and it'll be distributed throughout the hospital. And it's designed to highlight things that we're already doing mindfully, as well as mindfulness practice that we might aspire to. So the idea is that each card will say, we work in a more mindful hospital where we, and then the sentence finishes with a concrete action or practice. So we have some suggestions for how staff and teams can use these cards, perhaps like a mindful appreciative inquiry, or during meditations during team meetings, for example. So I thought maybe we could practice one here if you're both okay with that.
Yeah, well, sure. So I'll just share a few. These are mock-ups. It's not the final design yet, but this is what it might look like. Something like this. We work in a more mindful hospital where we dot 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 dot. And there's an element of chance to it. There's a bit of a game behind it too. So it's meant to be a very engaging exercise. I don't know, Mark, would you be willing to give this a try and play with
Of
us?
course. Let's see how
Okay.
we do.
So why don't you give me a number between 1 and 56, and then I'll read you a card, and then maybe you can share just an anecdote or an experience that you've had with this practice that you've seen it at work or you've used it at work, or alternatively, it can be aspirational, where you could see this being useful. What kind of situation could you see a practice like this being useful? So I need a number between 1 and 56.
43.
43. Okay. We work in a more mindful hospital where we practice informal mindfulness, bringing awareness and kindness to our daily activities. Can you
Well,
think
that's
of
kind of the
any?
heart. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the heart and soul of all of it. And I think we've touched on it in two different ways. I think, I mean, it's hard to, I I guess I want to do the activity as it's being led, but it just makes me feel like it's a good pulling together of everything we talked about today.
Absolutely.
Awareness and kindness to each of the people we're talking to all day long as an aspiration or, as an intention. And also, one of the things Joanna mentioned is that, I think it's an important part of resilience, especially during challenging times, to give our full awareness to the positive times because it's easy to lose touch with those. So I think that that one card, that one intention really summarizes a lot of what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, thanks. So I wonder if we should close with a closing practice. We're close to time. Would that be a good
So
time?
Joanna, do you want to end with a closing practice?
Sure, I'd love to do that. I think the only other thing I'll do before we close is just suggest how important mindful communication is, and how we embed this theme in our work. Uh, we rely and trust on the strength and the resilience of our relationships, and so mindfulness is about people. And so really being able to bring this way that we communicate in a mindful way is very important. And also I would just say that within our hospital community, mindfulness and communication can help plant the seeds of truth and reconciliation and growing awareness around the suffering associated with systemic racism and social injustice. Tragically, there's been a recent discovery of unmarked graves of Indigenous children who attended residential schools in Canada. And so, more than ever, we need compassion and understanding to ease the suffering of Indigenous people have experienced through the dispossession of their lands, the loss of their culture, and systemic racism, including in the healthcare setting. So, as part of our mindfulness practice, as we do land acknowledgements to recognize this privilege of living and working on these unceded territories. And we also have asked our Indigenous colleagues to help us with input on our resources, as well as we have an operations lead for Indigenous health on our council. So the power of being aware, and bringing a humility as well as a skillfulness, it can be very, very powerful and obviously relevant and important. So I just wanted to share that, and I'd be very happy to give a closing practice. So I just ask you to choose a comfortable position. Obviously, if you like, you can close your eyes. I really enjoy softening my eyes as I move into my practice. And so we're going to create a mindful pause by bringing our awareness to our breathing. So taking a full breath in, releasing a full breath out. Breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in. Breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Just allowing the breath to flow naturally. And in the spirit of healing in healthcare, allowing the following words and phrases to settle in your heart. As best I can, may I bring the energy of mindfulness to my day. May I grow in awareness and understanding May I be compassionate and skillful in my actions. May I remain curious and hopeful when things are difficult. May I listen deeply and speak truthfully and with kindness. May I be mindful of my limitations. And may I practice compassion for myself and for others. Just continuing to breathe mindfully and then releasing the practice when you're ready. Thanks.
Thank you for that. That was wonderful. So I appreciate you both being here today. It's been awesome. Wish we could go out for lunch next and just kind of keep talking. But if we can just let people know where they could find more information about what you're doing, about the card deck maybe, that would be, I think, a useful thing to wrap up with. And then I'll do a couple administrative details. Oh, one thing I did want to say before just for anyone who's watching this and is intrigued by what Joanna said, there'll be a whole session on nonviolent communication and mindfulness in communication later in the conference by Oren Sofer. So anyone who's interested in the communication piece can follow up with that.
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So the BC Children's Hospital Center for Mindfulness, we have a website. It's bcchildrens.ca/mindfulness. bcchildrens.ca/mindfulness. And for those of our colleagues in Canada, I would invite you to reach out to us, and we have a monthly session for healthcare providers virtually across the country on Wednesdays. It's called Wake Up Wednesday. So you can email us at mindfulness@cw.bc.ca and ask to be put on that mailing list as well.
Joanna, do you want to add any?
Um, no, I just perhaps just expressing my gratitude for this really lovely conversation, the opportunity to bring these ideas to the space, and to really express my gratitude to all who are watching and for the beautiful work that you do. Wherever you find yourself, it does make a difference. And I'm so proud to be part of this collective of healers, of individuals who are trying to help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a perfect way to end. So thank you both for being here, and hopefully we'll get in touch with each other and see each other real soon. So take care, everyone. Bye bye.